All right, so uh, are you ready to dive into a classic movie debate? Annie Hall versus Manhattan?
Oh,
Two
yeah.
Woody Allen films, both critically acclaimed, but
Right.
which one, like, really is the better film?
Yeah.
Annie Hall won 4 Oscars back in '77, Best Picture and all that. And Manhattan maybe didn't get the awards, but still considered one of his absolute best.
Absolutely.
You guys sent in your thoughts and opinions, and along with some articles and reviews, we're going to break it all down and see what makes each film special.
It is really interesting how these two films, they came out just 2 years apart, right? Both directed by Woody Allen, but they offer such different experiences. It's almost like he was exploring two different sides of
I
himself.
know, it's kind of wild, right?
Yeah, as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and we're going to kind of explore those different sides, looking at everything from how each film portrays romance to the way they're structured, even down to those iconic visuals.
Yeah.
By the end of this deep dive, I think you'll walk away with some serious Woody Allen knowledge, but maybe even like a new perspective on these films.
I think so too. It's those little nuances, those things that might have slipped by on a casual viewing that we're going to unpack.
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's start with the heart of any good movie, the romance.
Okay.
Annie Hall is labeled a romantic comedy, and it definitely delivers on the laughs.
Yeah.
It's about the messy, unpredictable nature of relationships, but told with that signature Woody Allen wit. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And you see that in how the film portrays those awkward first dates, those anxieties of trying to make a relationship work. It feels very relatable.
Yeah, totally. I mean, who hasn't had a date that felt like a scene straight out of Annie Hall?
Right.
But what strikes me is how those comedic moments never feel forced.
Yeah.
They come organically from the characters and their interactions. But think about that scene with the lobsters in the kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
Pure comedic genius.
That's a perfect example. It's funny, but it also reveals so much about Alvy and Annie's personalities and the challenges they face in connecting with each other.
Yeah, yeah. Now we're going to shift gears to Manhattan. And it's like stepping into a different world, tonally at least.
Right.
This is a romantic drama full of longing and complexity. It's not just about the surface level of relationships. It dives into those deeper questions about love, desire, what it means to find fulfillment.
And the characters reflect that complexity. You've got Isaac, played by Woody Allen, juggling relationships with two women, Tracy, a high school student who represents innocence and youthful energy, and then Mary, his best friend's mistress, someone who embodies passion and uncertainty.
Yeah, you almost get a sense that Isaac is drawn to each woman for what she represents in his own life.
Yeah.
Tracy's almost like a symbol of his own lost youth, his
Oh,
longing for a simpler time.
right.
And Mary, well, she represents the excitement and danger of an illicit affair.
That's a good point. It's fascinating to see how those relationships play out against the backdrop of New York City, this place that can be both incredibly romantic and brutally isolating. In a way, the city itself becomes a character in the film, reflecting the complexities of the characters' lives.
Well, that segues perfectly into the next big difference, the way each film tells its story. Annie Hall throws convention out the window with its nonlinear narrative. We're jumping back and forth in time, seeing Alvy's memories, even getting those moments where he breaks the fourth wall and talks directly to us, the audience.
It's like we're inside Alvy's head, experiencing his anxieties and insecurities firsthand. Those jump cuts aren't just stylistic choices. They mirror the fragmented nature of memory and perception.
I love how you put that. It makes the film so much more engaging, right? You're constantly trying to piece together the story, just like Alvy is, trying to make sense of his own life and relationships. And I think that's one of the reasons why Annie Hall resonated with so many people. It captures that universal feeling of being a bit lost, a bit neurotic, and trying to figure it all out.
It's a very modern way of storytelling, reflecting the complexities of the human experience. Now, Manhattan takes a more traditional approach, following a linear storyline.
Yeah, but don't let that fool you into thinking it's any less compelling. Manhattan is all about Isaac's journey, his internal struggles, and how they play out in his relationships and his work.
And visually, it's stunning. We'll dig into that more later, but that black and white cinematography creates this timeless, almost mythical quality, especially when contrasted with the very real, very human struggles of the characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really where that visual style comes in, right? It's not just about pretty pictures, it's about how those visuals enhance the storytelling and deepen our understanding of the characters and their world.
Yeah, like the visuals are almost another language that the film's using to communicate with us.
Exactly.
And speaking of visual style, that leads us to another big difference between these two films, right?
Right. Annie Hall is very simple, almost documentary-like at times with the cinematography. It feels very intimate, like you're eavesdropping on these characters' lives.
Yeah, and that intimacy is like heightened by those close-ups, those moments where you can see every flicker of emotion in Alvy and Annie's eyes. It's like the film is inviting us into their innermost thoughts and feelings. Then we have Manhattan with its breathtaking black and white cinematography, and it's such a departure from that intimate, almost voyeuristic feel of Annie Hall.
Yeah, it's almost operatic in its grandeur,
Yeah.
especially those iconic shots of the New York City skyline. Remember that famous opening montage set to Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue?
Oh, yeah.
It's like a
That's
love letter to the city, showcasing its energy, its beauty, its romanticism.
Yeah, but it's interesting though because even with those sweeping shots, Manhattan still manages to feel very personal. It's like we're seeing the city through Isaac's eyes, experiencing its beauty and its melancholy alongside him.
I agree.
And that use of jazz throughout the film, it's not just background music, it's like the soundtrack to Isaac's soul.
It's so evocative, and it speaks to Woody Allen's deep connection to New York City. He's not just filming there, he's capturing the soul of the city.
So
Think about that scene where Isaac and Mary are walking along the East River at night with the bridge lit up behind them and that Gershwin music swelling in the background. It's so romantic, so melancholic. It's pure Woody Allen.
Oh, I get goosebumps just thinking about it. It's moments like that where you realize that Manhattan is more than just a romantic drama. It's a meditation on the city itself and how it shapes the lives and relationships of the people who live there.
It's like he's saying that you can't separate the characters from their environment. They're intertwined, influencing and shaping each other.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And
I-
that's what makes this comparison so rich,
Yeah.
right? We're not just talking about two different films. We're talking about two different approaches to filmmaking, two different ways of seeing the world.
Exactly. And what I find particularly interesting is how both films, despite their differences, feel deeply personal to Woody Allen. It's like we're getting a glimpse into his psyche, his anxieties, his unique perspective on life, love, and the city he calls home.
It's true. Both films, in their own way, grapple with themes of love loss and the search for meaning, and they do it with a blend of humor and melancholy that's so characteristic of Woody Allen's work.
And it's not just about the themes, it's about the way he uses humor. In Annie Hall, it's more neurotic, more self-deprecating, almost a defense mechanism. But in Manhattan, the humor feels darker, more bittersweet, reflecting a certain disillusionment with life.
It makes you wonder if that shift in tone reflects a real evolution in Woody Allen's own outlook on life between those 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Did success with Annie Hall bring about some introspection, leading to a more, dare I say, mature approach with Manhattan?
That's a fascinating question, and I think it speaks to the power of art to reflect not just the artist's vision, but also their personal journey.
You're absolutely right. And that's what makes this deep dive so rewarding. It's not just about dissecting two classic films. It's about using those films as a springboard to explore bigger questions about life, love, and the creative process.
And I think that's what makes these films so enduring. They're not just entertainment. They're invitations to engage in deeper conversations about ourselves and the world around us.
And I'm curious, thinking about everything we've talked about, do any of these elements resonate with you more than others?
Yeah, I think I'm drawn to that raw honesty in Annie Hall, that willingness to expose those awkward, uncomfortable moments that we all experience in relationships. But I also find myself swept away by the beauty and grandeur of Manhattan. It's like those two films appeal to different sides of my personality.
It's what makes them both so captivating. It's almost like a Rorschach test for your soul, right?
Hmm.
What you gravitate towards in each film might say something about your own views on love relationships and how you see the world.
I love that analogy. And it reminds me of something we touched on earlier, the way each film tells its story, Annie Hall. With its nonlinear narrative, it speaks to the way our memories work, how we piece together fragments of the past to create a narrative that makes sense of our lives. And then Manhattan, with its linear structure, it feels more deliberate, more controlled, like a carefully crafted story.
It makes you think about how those different approaches might reflect two different stages in Woody Allen's artistic development. Annie Hall is full of experimentation, breaking those traditional rules of storytelling. It feels almost playful in a way.
And then with Manhattan, you see a more mature filmmaker, someone who's mastered the craft and is using it to explore more complex themes and ideas. It's like he's moved beyond simply entertaining us. He's challenging us to think about the bigger questions of life. But it's not just a shift in themes, it's a shift in perspective.
Okay, unpack that a little more for me. What do you
Yeah.
mean by a shift in perspective?
Well, in Annie Hall, it feels like we're seeing the world through the eyes of a young, neurotic New Yorker, someone who's still trying to find his place. But in Manhattan, the perspective feels more mature, more reflective, almost melancholic. It's like Woody Allen is looking back on his life, his relationships, his city, and seeing it all with a newfound clarity and perhaps a touch of regret.
It's like he's saying, here's the beauty and the pain of it all, and I'm not going to shy away from either. And that's what makes Manhattan so
Yeah.
powerful. It's not just a love story. It's a love letter to a city, a time and a certain way of life, but one that's tinged with a sense of loss and the realization that nothing lasts forever.
Yeah, and that sense of melancholy, that awareness of time passing, it really permeates every frame of Manhattan. You know,
Yeah.
it's in the way Isaac looks at Tracy, knowing that relationship can't last. It's
Right.
in those long shots of the city, almost like he's desperately trying to hold on to something that's slipping away.
And it's in the music. Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, it's beautiful, but there's an underlying sadness to it, a sense of yearning for something that may just be unattainable. Yeah, it's like the music is mirroring the character's own emotional journeys.
Mhm.
They're all searching for happiness, for connection, but they're also haunted by the knowledge that time is fleeting and that nothing gold can stay.
Right, and that brings us back to the question we posed at the beginning of this deep dive. Which film reigns supreme, Annie Hall or Manhattan?
It is a tough one, right?
Yeah.
Because we've really uncovered so much richness in both films. They're both masterpieces in their own right, but they offer such different experiences.
It really is like comparing apples and oranges. They're both delicious fruits, but they appeal to different tastes.
Exactly. And I think the beauty of this deep dive is that it's not about choosing a winner. It's about appreciating what each film brings to the table.
And what they reveal about Woody Allen as a filmmaker,
You got it. And maybe even what they reveal about us as viewers.
right?
You know, what speaks to us in these films, what resonates with our own experiences and perspectives.
Because great art, like great conversation, it should spark those kinds of reflections.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes Annie Hall and Manhattan so enduring. They're not just films. They're starting points for deeper conversations about life.
Love the human condition.
And those conversations can continue long after the credits roll.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought. Think about what you've learned about Annie Hall and Manhattan. Think about how those films have made you feel what they've made you think about. And then ask yourself this. What does your preference for one film over the other, or even your appreciation for both, reveal about your own views on love relationships and the search for meaning in a complex world?
It's a question worth pondering. And who knows, maybe it'll lead you down a path of discovering even more cinematic gems.
Because the world of film is vast and full of wonders just waiting to be explored.